Starting the recording in 3, 2, 1. So for these rounds, these will be some post commentary done just because for these last few rounds I was playing at a friend's place. So I will just quickly go over them and talk about my plays as well as just thoughts going through each turn and each round. So just looking at the lineup here, it's a little bit different. It's a triple Demacia lineup, which is something you don't really see very often. But when you do see a triple rally lineup, it's usually, the Shen Jarvan is pretty standard, Silver Auction, usually pretty standard, and the last deck is usually another very strong rally deck. Either this could be a Poppy rally deck, or it could be like a Lulu Zed elusive rally deck, but instead we have Zoe Aesol. And what's weaker about this kind of triple Demacia lineup is the fact that it's just not as punishing into decks like Lee Sin. And as we see here, he's actually forced to respect the Lee Sin because I think it does beat his Aesol Demacia deck. Excuse me. And now, knowing that our Lee Sin is most likely getting banned, it's just a question of whether or not we want to play into, or just like which of these three decks we want to play into. And I think the answer here is just banning away Silver Auction. When thinking about our two decks, we are very reactive, and having the Combat Tricks plus Spell Shield units is quite annoying. In addition, we do run 2 Ruinations in our Sentinel control deck, so against a deck like Aesol Demacia, or even Shen Jarvan, which actually has 0 denies, I'm very happy playing into them. And so this ban phase works out to what I would think is quite favorable. And now these mulligans are relatively straightforward just because the way this deck kind of plays out is pretty similar. Regardless of the matchup, looking for early fearsomes, and I keep Vile Feast here just as an answer to an early Zoe. Their deck only runs Sharp Sight as a buff target, and I can get off like a sneaky like Vile Feast onto the Zoe just to ensure that his Zoe can't level up, or if he has a Sharp Sight, he's potentially forced out to protect him. And so that's the reasoning behind the mulligans. I drop Elise on 2, and I gotta swing in for a little bit of damage. Now, this Zoe attack here is fine. I could be tempted into Vile Feasting the Zoe here, but I choose not to because he's not getting an additional card off of it, and this 1 mana discount isn't very bothersome in my opinion. Now, in this case, he could have actually went Star Chart into Moonglow, and I would be rather punished. But because his deck actually doesn't aim to really level up Zoe, I have a lot of time in my hands, and I really want to develop this Sentinel before I Vile Feast Zoe in order to get the most value out of it. And now for the same reason, I choose not to Vile Feast Zoe because he could now Sharpsight it, not only denying me the Slay onto Zoe to buff my Sentinel, but also allowing him to value trade into one of my Fearsome blockers, which would be a no-no. And in this case, I take my attacks before I can get punished by any development, so cards like a Sprite, Solari, Day, Sunforger coming down would just completely stop my attack. And this leaves me room to be a little bit more reactive. So when the Traveler comes down, I get to freely kill Zoe with the Vile Feast, knowing that he has no protection up for it. So Zoe dying here is pretty nice. It's just a little bit of worry off my mind, because if they do somehow level up Zoe, that could just become a catastrophic nightmare. And this turn is actually quite interesting. He plays the, whatever it's called, the, you know what it's called, the Sunforger, but he doesn't have enough mana to play like a single combat, so I am not very worried about it. Now, I have been doing a really good job at, chipping away at his health total, so I could actually block with the spider, then Vile Feast my own spider to deny him 5 healing, which could allow me to push through damage with the fearsomes. But at the same time, this being a 5-4 on board makes it quite awkward for me to attack through, just because having a fearsome blocker that could trade into really any of my units is quite annoying. On the other flip side, again, because he's tapped out, this second Vow Feast would actually level up my Elise, giving me extra attack bonuses from not only the fearsome spiders, but also the ability to drag unfavorable blocks like the Traveler out of the way in order to sneak more damage through. And so I'm just doing like some calculations in my head. If I let him heal 5 here, but I get to level Elise, and I get to still kill the Sunforger with like a Mystic Shot, am I pushing more damage? And ultimately, I decided to just go for this kind of line. Not only does this level up my Elise to make her a 4-3 fearsome in the future, but this allows me to be able to challenge the Traveler with one of these 1/1 spiders on my attack turn and allow me to push a little bit more damage as well. So I think this overall nets out to be relatively similar and removes the Sunforger from his board. I think in this particular case, his health total, between 12 and 17 is actually not as relevant, even though he is not on like star shaping, for example. I do have this Ledros, and Ledros Atrocity is always going to be lethal, pretty much. But now the Elise comes down leveled, and I get a really clean attack here, especially if he doesn't have Sharp Sight. Even if he has Sharp Sight, he has to make a somewhat it's a fair block for him. I could have even dragged with both my spiders and then denied any sort of Sharp Sight at all, but I don't think that was necessarily worth it, especially because at that point I still have trouble closing out the game. So now he does some things to spend mana, and I'm here sitting with my decision. Like, if I can play Senna here, maybe the Darkness does me something, maybe this Whale of Despair starts helping me level up Senna, but I think a unique case with this deck is not only are you trying to chip in early damage with elusives, or rather not elusives, fearsome, sorry, you actually run cards like Ruination. And in these cases where I'm actually trying to tempo out my opponent at the same time as playing a control deck, this is where things you have to balance, right? Am I getting Senna down on board, or am I planning on ruinating the board away and then making everything sort of irrelevant, and I should just hold back my units so my Ruinate doesn't kill as many of my own units? But in this case, he drops down a Great Beyond, and which is annoying because I really don't want this to get an attack in. I also don't really have a particular clean way of dealing with it, but this 2-mana combo sort of does the trick at the moment. I could set up like a Whale into Ruination as well, but that seems a little bit slow for me, especially now I might be interested in playing Senna down. So I take the 10 here, but I get rid of the Great Beyond, and it goes back to my turn where I can drop down this Senna. So he drops another Sunforger down, and that makes things slightly awkward. I don't really want to attack into him, give him the free heal with the Sunforger into like my Sentinel, but he decides to commit a Concerted Strike here, and he actually gets super punished by this fast Thermo Beam, one of the coolest interactions I think Senna has with pretty much any card in the game, and not only gets punished by a Sharp Sight, and now that I know he doesn't have it, this opens me up to a really excellent attack. Not only does it leave Senna up, he has to block down the Sentinel and leave it at 1 health in order to survive. And against a deck like Demacia Targan, he actually doesn't have really any answers against 1 health units. So at this point, I'm debating whether or not I want to save up mana or drop this Ledros. I see that if he does nothing, my open attack pretty much kills him, and so I'm fine just passing back to see what he does. And now that he's played out the rest of his mana, I am deciding onto this Ledros coming down now. And I think I think playing Ledros here is completely fine. Not only does this mean that he can't attack with his 3 sisters, because me knowing he doesn't have Sharp Sight can't lose a Fearsome block for free into this Commander Ledros, and that only leaves his Silver Sisters to attack, which I don't really mind, and if I pass back here, I'm just burning my turn. So Ledros coming down here just makes a lot of sense, and puts lethal on the attack? Not quite, but it presents quite a big threat, shall I say. Going on 6 health's a little bit scary, but acceptable. And we set up this attack that we're going for, and we kind of just commit. So here's where things get spicy. So he opens with a Strafing Strike onto my Senna. I want to deny this, or at least try to push for lethal this turn. I could opt for a Darkness into Vile Feast instead of the Senna spell, because if this somehow doesn't go through, I lose both Sennas, or rather, even if it does go through, I still lose the Senna in hand, and maybe he has some other way to deal with it. But what this does is it plays around like a top deck Sharp Sight. He goes for Judgment, which I actually totally forgot was in his deck, but I had the 3 mana Thermal Beam to perfectly deal with the Golden Sisters, and this ends up to just be a sneaky lethal. So I think I played that game pretty well. I don't think I'd really change anything I did there. It's just you see in this particular game and matchup a very interesting sort of balance between me having the Ruination, not wanting to develop into the board in case I do want to play Ruination, and me developing the board and just beating him down as the control deck. And so now we face up Shellfolk into Aesol Demacia, which honestly I think is a fine matchup for us, because their removal is so limited to what they have on board, and we have Aloof Travelers for their sort of endgame cards. And so I'm feeling pretty confident going into this. I keep Thermo Beam, I keep Shellfolk. So I keep Thermo Beam for a turn 1 Zoe, I keep Shellfolk as sort of like a main pop-off win condition, and I keep this Telescope just as playable card if I need it. Blue Sentinel comes down. There's no reason to play Shellfolk now. If I top deck a Sump Fumes, I want to be able to play that at 3 next turn. Oh, I still play it, never mind. Not sure why exactly I play it. Maybe it's because I don't have Sump Fumes in hand that I feel okay playing it. But I play it anyway. I actually find Messenger, which actually supplements my curve out this turn, so pat on the back for me there. And this lets me just use my mana effectively this turn and continue to cycle through my deck, set up my level on Vi, and just get more resources for an eventual turn. Now this is kind of interesting. I don't really particularly care about my health total. I'm just thinking about setting up blocks to the points where if I need to pick off these units, I can do that. And so I'm debating whether or not I want to block into this Blue Sentinel just to set it at 1 health. Ultimately, I decide not to just because I have like a Vi, which in the end I could challenge it down. This 2-3 isn't doing much. And I actually expand this Pokestick because the value of pinging a unit from his deck is quite low. There's not many things I'm going to end up killing with the Pokestick besides like a Zoe or that Telescope, and so I'm just getting value where I can get it out of. So instead of just trading down 2-1 for 2-1, I expend the Pokestick as one of my only really targets I can kill with it. So again, not much I can do here. I could Time Trick here, but I'm saving these for this Shellfolk just to ensure that if he Concerted Strikes my Shellfolk as I play it, I do have an answer for it. And this aloof is pretty good draw here. I could just end up slamming Vi as well, depending on what he sort of plays. But this is a pretty good draw for me as well. So he plays Zoe. Now, I think in this matchup, or at least against any Zoe deck with a Shellfolk deck, you do want to be very careful about letting them get super cool star charts so that they can't get a card like Equinox. And so I just go for this ping here first. If he commits a Sharp Sight, maybe I dig for like a Mystic Shot or a Sump Fumes to kill it. But in this case, he doesn't commit to it. He has a very awkward turn with his mana, and I am able to drop Vi, which I think I do, and just have a pretty good setup. Or I might have played Aloof Traveler here, but I think I just play Vi. He plays Sunforger as a body, and that's fine. Turn ends, and we continue. So I think this is like an interesting spot. Like, it's not very good to play Shellfolk out here. Not only do I get very minimal value out of it, I can only trinket trade for value. It just doesn't do me much, so I opt to go for this Aloof Traveler turn. My hand's also kind of full, so I'm looking for ways I can sort of dump out a few cards in hand, just so that it opens me up to having a little bit more flexibility with this Shellfolk plus Time Trick, and you know, just not feel too bad with a super full hand and have to mismanage my resources. Aloof Travelers here discards his A-Soul, which to be expected. Isn't super impactful, just because games going to turn 10 is very rare here. He plays another Telescope. Honestly, the scariest thing that he can pull off of it is Equinox, or even like, I don't know, Rune Nation or something unexpected. Just some removal for my Vi. And here, now he expends most of his mana, I'm feeling a little bit risque, trying to see if I can level up my Vi with this attack, or at least force out a few resources out of him. So I opt to go for this Trinket Trade Otterpuss into Prank. I have double Time Trick in hand for this Shellfolk, so I'm not particularly worried about saving this Trinket Trade for value. I see that he has a Sharp Sight in hand, Prank it to 4, and go for this Vi level up. This forces out like a single combat or a Strafing Strike that he does run as a one of, which he expends here. I think it's safe to say that he also does not have single combat, and so that only leaves him with Concerted Strike. It's just like a simple hand read they can do based off of the situation. If he had single combat, he'd use it first. Not only is it more mana efficient, Strafing Strike synergizes higher with his dragon units, and so I think it's safe to say that he just does not have single combat, meaning that the only thing that can kill me, or kill my Shellfolk rather, is a Concerted Strike. So with that information, he goes for this full swing, which also is very suspicious. Not only does it just not provide a threat, it allows me some value trades, and now again, just going back in my head, he only has the ability to play Concerted Strike to kill my Shellfolk. But now that his board's thinned out to the point where he has to play a unit and then play Concerted Strike, so that leaves him 3 mana to play a unit with 3 attack, right? Now that he doesn't have it, I get an open turn where I can use my Shellfolk to get value out of cards like this Time Trick. Just quickly count my cards in hand, make sure I'm not overdrawing, and I hit a Sump Fume, so just kind of fat. It just deals with his board very, very effectively, especially these pesky elusive units that I honestly don't have a good way of dealing with. And it helped me progress towards my Ezreal level up, which is also good. I have another Shellfolk in hand, so it's not the end of the world if he has a Concerted Strike to kill my Shellfolk. And so I pass back just to see what he wants to do. So Scooching Dragon comes down here, which is, you know, slightly awkward. I do want to be a little bit more efficient with my mana total. Not only do I kind of need to dump hands out of my dump cards out of my hand, I also need to work towards some of my other win conditions. And this is where like things are a little bit strange. Like if I hold up this Sump Fumes, I can play around like a Concerted Strike, but I'd have to hold up 3 mana, and I just don't really have a great turn otherwise. And so I just go for it. If he has the Concerted Strike to kill my Shellfolk, I can play out another one and sort of be fine with it. So I go for this opening me up to a potential Concerted Strike. But if he doesn't have it, again, I get a little bit more information on a hand read to the extent of whether or not I need to be scared of something like that. So card from the right, card from the left side, sorry, is Concerted Strike. He kills my Shellfolk. Not a big deal. I kill an elusive on the off turn. And I round off my turn with this Thermal Beam onto the Fixer. This just slows down his game plan as well. The lower it takes for him to kill me, the longer I have to outvalue him. And so as long as I'm not taking any elusive damage, he doesn't really have a way of punching through either. Solari Priestess coming down again. And right now I'm just like trying to bait out his attack. I play the Aloof Travelers, which discards his Radiant. Not super impactful, but you know, again, giving me a little bit more information on what his hand is. If his hand's capped at 5, maybe there's a chance there's Concerted, maybe there isn't. But again, I can take my time here and be slow with it. Force out this attack. Not exactly force out, but I think he's in a position where he realizes that he's going to be behind in value, and at some point, he's going to be the one that needs to close out the game before I can just finish him off. And so he goes for an attack just to trade down the board, which again leaves me the space to play Ezreal. And I think really great about this play in particular is it just sort of psychologically baits him into this single combat, which, you know, is a single combat that's not going after my Shellfolk. And now, again, just counting his resources and cards, it's very unlikely he has another great answer for my Shellfolk, and if he has no response to it, it's sticking around on the board. I now just have so much value in hand. I have this Conchologist, I have this Trinket Trade, and I have this Time Trick ready to pop off. If he doesn't kill it on sight, I'm just going to get a lot of value out of this and potentially just ride it through to win the game. He commits the Destroyer, which he got off of the Traveler, I believe. But now I know that he doesn't have Concerted Strike. He's used a single and a strafing. Very limited ways of dealing with his Shellfolk. He probably would have dealt with it in the first place. But now I get a sort of pop off here. And if I know that he no longer has removal in his hand, this Ezreal might just kill him. So I start pranking his hand just to see what's up. Dragon's Clutch is pretty much a completely dead card in this case. And I am at the same time making his Sharp Sights unplayable while stealing 1 cost Sharp Sights, which, you know, is actually kind of nuts. He has his double Sharp Sight in hand. I'm going to knock off the Spell Shield here just in case I want to have the option of mini-morphing it if I need to. He plays Dragon's Clutch, which draws him a Soul and maybe Eclipse Dragon. The classic combo. And Conchologist finds me even more removal in the form of Stump Fiends, which is excellent. So just do a quick evaluation of what I want to do. Do I want to mini-morph this unit or not? But obviously my first priority is just protecting this Shellfolk. I still have one more Time Trick that ideally I'm able to cash in. And this also puts him in an awkward spot where his Sharp Sights cost at least 3 mana more than mine. And so if he has to spend mana into this, I'm actually going to be pretty happy, right? If he lets us go through, like drops a soul, I want to save many more for that. And if he's just competing with Sharp Sights to kill this, I'm just completely just drawing out all of his mana. And I think at this point he realizes he can't pay 6 mana for Sharp Sight just to trade here. Settles with it, and I get to drop my Ezreal, most likely uncontested based off the way he's playing so far. Having second Ezreal in hand as well is a great sign. He drops the Eclipse Dragon, and now I just get free reign to sort of just pop off now. My Ezreal's leveled, I have lots of spells in hand, and I'm ready to go face. Mystic Shot for extra damage is, I think, the obvious pick here. And I'm going to cash in the fact that I drew an additional card this turn to activate my Sump Fumes, aim it at the Destroyer so that a Mystic Shot in the future can just deal with it. Oncologist, again, is an excellent draw. Time Trick, again, an excellent draw. But also, very importantly, this activates my Sump Fumes as well. My whole hand is Mystic Shots and Sump Fumes and Time Tricks. And I'm feeling really good. So I think also in this case what the pranks have done very, very well is that I know he has a Sharp Sight in hand, but it also costs 6 mana, meaning that it's going to be his entire turn if he wants to play it to block my Ezreal. And so I can put him in a very uncomfortable position where he's most likely forced to use his Sharp Sight unless he top deck into his third Sharp Sight or second or third single combat to potentially kill my Ezreal. But because he has to commit 6 mana first to do that, I have plenty of removal in my hand to answer whatever he does to block it. So even if he puts it on the Eclipse Dragon, I can potentially mini-morph it. If he puts on anything else, I can like Sump Fumes or Mystic Shot it just to deal with it. And if my Ezreal lives one more turn, I just have so much burn in hand to pretty much knock him down from whatever health total left he has. So the main thing is where we'll expect to see this Sharp Sight put it on. He puts it onto the Destroyer, going to 4 health. Again, not very impactful because I can just kill it. Opting to use the Sump Fumes here just because it can't go face. I don't really mind trading on the board. That was sort of just like a bait, or just to make him think a little bit harder. I know this game's ending, and I'm just sort of just trying to, you know, slowly bait things out of him. I get even more value with the Oncologist, just looking for spells that target. Group Shot is excellent, just the 0 mana deal too. This is a Mystic Shot to the face, and it can just help me pick off his board here. I have 6 damage in hand. If I just set him down to 6, I win the game. And at this point, I'm just taking it very patiently. Mushroom Cloud to burst damage. He realizes that it's kind of doomed and surrenders the game there. So I think a very clean set. Oops, pardon me for that. Very clean set that went pretty much my way. I don't really think I made any bad plays in this round in particular, or any mistakes. So pat on the back for me, very excellently piloted, and a good set overall.